The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Rhino was a concrete box, lit by a flickering bulb that buzzed like a dying fly. Staff Sergeant Michael Mick Torres stood at the head of the table, his weathered face set in a grimace as he traced a finger over a crumpled map of Kandahar province. It was March 2002, and the war in Afghanistan had already chewed up more men than the brass cared to admit. Across from him, his squad lounged in folding chairs, their gear piled in the corner like a junkyard of olive drab. "Listen up," Mick said, his voice gravelly from too many cigarettes. "Second Platoon's patrol went dark 2 days ago, up in the mountains north of here. Last transmission mentioned a heat signature, big, moving fast. Then nothing." He tapped the map, marking a jagged ridge. "We're going in to find them." Corporal Jake Hawk Hawkins, the squad scout, leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Taliban?" he asked, twirling a knife between his fingers. "Maybe," Mick replied. "But the locals are spooked. Keeps whispering about something big out there. Not human." He didn't believe the rumors, war-bred superstition, but the unease in his gut wouldn't quit. Specialist Sarah Doc Reynolds, the medic, snorted. "Goat herders and ghost stories." "Great." She adjusted her med kit, her short blonde hair tucked under a cap. Private First Class Tommy Rookie Nguyen, barely 19, shifted nervously. "I heard the Pushtun leave offerings up there. For spirits or whatever." "Cut the crap, Rookie," barked Sergeant Daniel Dan Carter, the heavy weapons guy. He hefted his 50 BMG Barrett rifle onto the table with a thud. "If it moves, I'll blow it apart." Mick nodded. "Gear up. Night vision, full loadout. We roll in 20. The squad moved, strapping on M4 carbines and checking mags. Outside, the desert stretched black under a moonless sky, the wind howling like a warning. Mick slung his rifle and stepped into the night, the weight of command pressing harder than his pack. Whatever was out there, he'd bring his men back or die trying. The Humvee rumbled to a stop at the base of the ridge, its headlights carving yellow scars across the sand. Mick led the squad on foot, boots crunching over gravel as they climbed toward the missing patrol's last known position. Hawk took point, his silhouette ghosting ahead, while Dan lugged the Barrett, cursing the incline. Doc kept pace, her med kit slapping against her thigh, and Rookie brought up the rear, clutching his M for like a lifeline. 2 hours in, Hawk froze, raising a fist. Mick crouched, scanning the darkness through his night vision goggles. The green glow revealed a trail of wreckage, shattered radio parts, a shredded rucksack, and streaks of blood-dried black on the rocks. "Ambush," Hawk whispered, kneeling beside a pile of bones. Mick's jaw tightened. The bones were human, picked clean, but too big, femurs longer than a man's leg should be. "What the hell?" Doc muttered, gloved hands sifting through the pile. "These aren't right. Too large, too heavy." "Animals?" Rookie asked, voice trembling. "No teeth marks," Doc said. "Something else did this." A low growl rolled down the wind, faint but deep enough to rattle Mick's chest. Rookie whipped around, aiming at shadows. "You hear that?" "Focus," Mick snapped, though his own pulse kicked up. He clicked his radio, calling base. "Rhino, this is Bravo 2. We've got signs of a fight, possible KIA. Requesting." Static drowned him out, the signal dead. He swore under his breath. "Comms are toast." Hawk pointed up the trail. "Tracks head that way. Toward that cave." A dark maw yawned in the cliff face, its edges jagged like broken teeth. The squad exchanged looks. Dan's bravado faltered, Doc's frown deepened, and Rookie's eyes widened. Mick weighed their options. Turn back and report, or push on and find answers. Duty 1. "Move out," he ordered. Eyes open, weapons hot. They advanced, the air growing colder as they neared the cave. The bones thinned out, replaced by faint smears of orange. Hair or dye, Mick couldn't tell. His gut screamed to retreat, but he'd lost men before. Not again. Not if he could help it. He gripped his rifle tighter, the squad fanning out behind him, their breaths fogging in the chill. Whatever took that patrol, they'd face it head-on. The cave loomed closer, a black void swallowing the starlight. Mick held up a hand, signaling a halt 10 yards out. A stench hit them, foul like rotting meat and sweat, thick enough to gag. "Jesus," Dan coughed, covering his nose. Hawk edged forward, flashlight beam slicing through the dark. It caught something on the cave walls, strands of coarse, orange hair clinging to the rock, glinting like copper wire. "What is that?" Rookie whispered, stepping back. Before Mick could answer, the ground trembled. A shadow shifted inside the cave, massive and wrong, unfolding into a shape that dwarfed them all. It stepped into view, A giant, 15 feet tall, its fiery red hair cascading over shoulders broader than a Humvee's hood. Six-fingered hands flexed around a spear, its tip crusted with blood. Its face twisted into a snarl, revealing double rows of jagged teeth, yellowed and sharp. Mick's mind blanked, training warring with disbelief. The thing was real, 1,500 pounds of muscle and menace, clad in tattered hides that stank of death. Its eyes, glowing like coals, locked on them. Holy! Doc started, but the giant roared, a sound that shook the ridge and drowned her out. Contact! Mick yelled, snapping his M4 to his shoulder. The squad scattered, instincts kicking in. Dan dropped to a knee, swinging the Barrett up, while Hawk dove for cover behind a boulder. Rookie froze, rifle shaking, as Doc shouted for him to move. The giant charged, faster than anything that size should be, its spear gleaming in the faint light. Mick fired first, rounds stitching across its chest, but it didn't slow. Dan's 50 boomed, a thunderclap that echoed off the cliffs, and the giant flinched, blood spraying from its side. It kept coming, spear raised high, aimed straight for them. Mick's heart pounded, time slowing as he braced for impact, the squad's shouts blending into a cacophony of fear and fury. This wasn't Taliban. This wasn't human. This was something else, something they weren't ready for. The giant's spear flashed down like a guillotine, and Sergeant Dan Carter didn't have time to scream. The jagged tip punched through his chest, pinning him to the rocky ground with a sickening crunch. Blood sprayed across the dirt, black in the night vision glow, as his Barrett rifle clattered from his hands. Dan! Staff Sergeant Michael Mick Torres bellowed, voice cracking over the roar of the beast. The squad's formation shattered, instinct taking over where training failed. The creature loomed 15 feet tall, its red hair whipping in the wind, six-fingered hands flexing as it yanked the spear free. Double rows of teeth gleamed in a snarl, and its stench, rotting flesh and musk, choked the air. Corporal Jake Hawkins snapped his M4 up, squeezing the trigger. Rounds stitched across the giant's torso, sparking off its hide like it was armored. "It's not stopping," he shouted, diving behind a boulder as the thing swung its massive arm, missing him by inches. Private First Class Tommy Rookie Nguyen stood rooted, eyes wide, his rifle trembling in his grip. "Move, damn it!" Specialist Sarah Doc, Reynolds yelled, shoving him toward cover. The giant's speed was impossible, 1,500 pounds of muscle barreling forward, kicking up dust and stone. Mick fired bursts from his M4, aiming for its head, but the rounds barely slowed it. Its fiery eyes locked on him, and he felt the weight of something ancient, something that didn't belong in this war. "Focus fire," Mick ordered, voice steady despite the chaos. Dan's body lay crumpled, blood pooling beneath him, but there was no time to mourn. The squad had seconds before the giant closed the gap, its spear raised for another kill. Mick's mind raced. Taliban didn't bleed like this, didn't move like this. Whatever it was, they had to bring it down, or they'd all end up like Dan. Doc dragged Dan's body behind a jagged outcrop, her hands slick with his blood. "He's gone," she called, voice tight, but Mick couldn't look back. The giant charged Hawk's position, its spear slashing down. Hawk rolled aside, the blade gouging the earth where he'd been. He popped up, firing again, rounds tearing into its shoulder. The creature staggered, blood, dark and thick, dripping from the wound, but it roared and swung a fist, shattering the boulder into rubble. Mick spotted Dan's 50 Barrett half buried in the dirt. He sprinted for it, sliding to a knee as he scooped it up. The weight grounded him, its cold steel a lifeline. He braced the rifle, sighted the giant's chest, and fired. The boom echoed off the cliffs, a slug the size of a finger punching through its ribcage. The beast stumbled, a guttural howl ripping from its throat, but it didn't fall. "How's it still standing?" Rookie shrieked, finally finding his nerve and unloading his M4 in wild bursts. The giant hurled a rock the size of a tire, and Mick ducked as it smashed into the cave wall, showering him with shards. "Grenade!" he yelled. Rookie fumbled at his vest, yanked the pin, and lobbed it. The explosion lit the night, a fireball blooming at the giant's feet. Dust and smoke choked the air, and for a moment, Mick thought it was over. Then the silhouette emerged, limping but alive, its red hair singed and matted with gore. Hawk flanked left, pouring rounds into its side, while Doc grabbed Dan's spare mags and fed them to Rookie. The giant's resilience defied logic. 30 seconds of sustained fire, M4s chewing through ammo, the Barrett slugs ripping holes big enough to see through, and still it fought. Mick aimed again, the Barrett kicking against his shoulder. The shot caught its neck, blood spraying like a geyser, and it dropped to one knee, clawing the ground with six-fingered hands. "Keep it up," Mick shouted, voice raw. This wasn't a man. This was a nightmare, and they were running out of time. The giant's roar weakened, its movements slowing as the squad closed in. Hawk's M4 clicked empty, and he switched to his sidearm, popping off 9mm rounds. Rookie's second grenade landed short, but the blast staggered the beast further, its legs buckling. Mick fired the Barrett one last time, the slug tearing through its skull. Bone and brain sprayed, and the giant collapsed, a mountain of flesh and fury hitting the dirt with a thud that shook the ground. Silence fell, broken only by the squad's ragged breathing. Mick approached, pistol drawn, boots crunching over shattered rock. The giant lay still, its double-toothed maw slack, eyes dimming. He put a round in its head, insurance, and stepped back, holstering his weapon. Blood pooled beneath it, soaking the red hair into a muddy tangle. "Clear," he rasped, turning to his team. Hawk slumped against a rock, wiping sweat from his brow. Rookie stared at the corpse, hands shaking, while Doc knelt by Dan, closing his eyes with a trembling hand. "He didn't deserve that," she whispered, her voice cracking. Dan's chest was a ruin, the spear's exit wound gaping like a crater. Mick forced himself to look, the weight of command crushing him. He'd lost men before, but not like this. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, staring at the giant. Its six-fingered hands twitched once, then stilled. The cave loomed behind it, dark and silent, as if waiting for more. Hawk kicked its leg, testing, but it didn't budge. 15 feet, easy, he said. "Took everything we had." A distant hum cut through the night, rotors closing fast. Mick squinted at the sky, a black shape growing against the stars. "Chopper," Doc said, standing. "Ours?" Mick didn't answer. The fight was over, but something told him the real battle was just beginning. The giant's body sprawled before them, a secret too big to bury, and the sound of that Chinook promised answers, or a cage. He clenched his fists, tasting blood and dust, as the wind kicked up around them. The Chinook's rotors beat the air into a frenzy, kicking up a storm of sand and grit as it touched down 50 yards from the cave. Staff Sergeant Michael Mick Torres shielded his eyes, the giant's corpse sprawled at his feet, its red hair fluttering in the downdraft. The squad, Corporal Jake Hawk Hawkins, Specialist Sarah Doc Reynolds, and Private First Class Tommy Rookie Gwyn, stood in a loose semicircle, still catching their breath from the fight. Sergeant Daniel Dan Carter's body lay nearby, zipped into a black bag by Doc's steady hands. The chopper's ramp dropped, and a dozen figures in unmarked black fatigues spilled out, moving with the precision of a machine. Their leader, a tall man with a face like carved stone, strode forward, his rank insignia hidden. "Captain Reese, Task Force Omega," he said, voice clipped. "Step away from the asset." He gestured at the giant, its six-fingered hands limp in the dirt. Mick's grip tightened on his M4. "Asset? That thing killed one of my men. What the hell's going on?" His squad shifted behind him, uneasy but ready. Reese's men fanned out, rifles trained, not on the giant, but on them. "Stand down, Sergeant," Reese ordered, eyes cold. "This is above your pay grade." Two of his team hauled out a cargo net, draping it over the giant's 1,100-pound frame. Its double-toothed jaw lolled open as they hooked the net to the Chinook's winch, the chopper's engines whining under the strain. Mick stepped forward, but a barrel pressed into his chest stopped him. "We need answers," Hawk growled, hand twitching toward his sidearm. Reese didn't blink. "You need to follow orders," he said. "Load up. You're coming with us." The Black Ops team moved fast, securing the giant's body as the net lifted it skyward, its massive form swaying beneath the chopper. Mick glanced at Dan's bag, then at his squad, their faces a mix of shock and defiance. Whatever this was, it wasn't ending here. The Chinook lurched into the air, the giant's body dangling below like a grotesque trophy. Inside, Mick sat across from Reese, the squad crammed onto benches with Dan's body bags strapped between them. The Black Ops team watched in silence, their faces hidden behind balaclavas. The giant's stench lingered on their gear, a reminder of the nightmare they'd survived. Reese leaned forward, sliding a stack of papers across the vibrating floor. "Non-disclosure agreements," he said. "Sign them. You saw nothing tonight. No creature, no cave. Just an insurgent ambush. Carter died in a firefight. That's the story." "Bullshit," Mick spat. "That thing speared him like a pig. You're covering it up. Why?" Reese's expression didn't change, but his hand rested on his holster. "Sign or you disappear," he said. "Your choice." Rookie swallowed hard, pen shaking as he scrawled his name. Doc hesitated, then followed, her jaw tight. Hawk glared at Mick, waiting for a signal, but Mick took the pen, fury simmering beneath his calm. What was it? Hawk asked, voice low. Some kind of Nephilim? My preacher used to talk about giants, sons of angels. Reese cut him off with a sharp look. Save the Sunday school crap, he said. It's classified. But Mick caught Doc staring at the giant through the chopper's window, its orange-dyed hair catching the light. Local myths, she muttered. They leave offerings for things like that. Mountain spirits. The flight to Bagram airfield stretched on, the hum of the rotors drowning out thought. Mick's mind churned, Dan's death, the giant's impossible strength, the way it took 30 seconds of hell to kill it. He'd seen classified ops before, but this felt different. Bigger. Reese's team stayed silent, their eyes tracking every move. Mick signed the NDA, the pen digging into the paper, but his resolve hardened. They could force his silence, but not his memory. The Chinook banked hard, descending toward the sprawling base. Mick glanced at Hawk, who nodded slightly. They'd play along for now. But Dan deserved more than a lie, and that giant wasn't staying buried, not if Mick had anything to say about it. Bagram's runway lights flickered below as the Chinook touched down, the giant's netted corpse thudding onto the tarmac. MPs swarmed the hangar, sealing it off as Reese's team hauled the body inside. Mick and the squad climbed out, Dan's bag carried between them, their boots heavy on the concrete. Reese barked orders, and the giant vanished behind steel doors, its red hair the last thing Mick saw before they slammed shut. You're debriefed separately, Reese said, pointing them toward a Quonset hut. Stick to the script or you're done. He strode off, leaving them with two MPs who looked more nervous than they did. Mick caught a glimpse of an AC-130 pilot lingering near the hangar, his nod grim, like he'd seen this before. Inside the hut, a major with no name tag grilled Mick first. Insurgents hit your patrol. Carter took a round. That's it, right? The man's eyes bored into him, daring a contradiction. Mick clenched his fists under the table, picturing Dan's spear-torn chest, the giant's six-fingered grip. Yeah, he lied, voice flat. That's it. The major slid the NDA back, already signed. Good. You're on leave tomorrow. Keep your mouth shut. Mick nodded, but his hand shook as he stood, the lie burning in his throat. He passed Hawk in the hall, their eyes meeting. Hawk's debrief would match, but the truth simmered between them. Outside, the squad regrouped under a sodium lamp, the base humming around them. Rookie stared at his boots, Doc lit a cigarette, and Hawk kicked a pebble into the dark. They're hiding it, Hawk said. That pilot, he knows something. Mick didn't reply. He saw Dan's face every time he blinked, heard the giant's roar in the wind. The hangar loomed in the distance, MPs patrolling its perimeter. Whatever Reese had planned for that thing, Nephilim, monster, or military secret, it was gone now, and they were pawns in the game. Mick lit his own smoke, the ember glowing red, and vowed to find out why. For Dan. For them all. Weeks after Bagram, forward operating base Rhino felt like a cage. Staff Sergeant Michael Mick, Torres sat alone in the enlisted club, a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels sweating on the table. The TV droned CNN reports about Operation Enduring Freedom, but his mind replayed the cave, the giant's red hair, Dan's scream, the Chinook's hum. He'd lost men before, but this was deeper, a wound that wouldn't close. The squad was fracturing, and the NDAs they'd signed hung like nooses. Corporal Jake Hawkins hunched over a laptop in the corner, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He'd been scouring conspiracy forums, chasing threads about giants in Afghanistan. Kunar Province 09, he muttered, sliding the screen toward Mick. Infantry guy saw a heat signature, 12 feet tall, moving like a ghost. Mick waved it off, but the whiskey couldn't drown the chill creeping up his spine. Private First Class Tommy Rookie, Nguyen hadn't spoken much since the fight. He'd wake screaming, dreaming of the cave, and Mick caught him sketching six-fingered hands in the margins of his letters home. Specialist Sarah Doc Reynolds kept her distance, her usual sarcasm gone. She'd filed a report on those oversized bones, only for it to vanish into some officer's desk. They're watching us, she'd whispered once, then clammed up. Mick drained his glass, the burn steadying him. The base buzzed with routine, patrols, chow lines, but an undercurrent of unease lingered. Grunts swapped stories of missing goats and orange-haired shadows on the ridges. Mick told himself it was war talk, the kind that bred ghosts. But Dan's empty bunk stared back every night, and the giant's double-toothed snarl haunted his sleep. He wasn't sure what scared him more, that it happened, or that it might not be over. The next day, a Pashtun elder visited the base, escorted by an interpreter. Mick overheard him talking to a lieutenant, his weathered hands gesturing toward the mountains. "CTCH," the old man said, voice low. "Red hair, big. Not alone." The interpreter shrugged it off as folklore, but Mick's gut twisted. He cornered Hawk later. "What's CTCH?" "Native American legend," Hawk said, lighting a cigarette. "Giants that ate people. Sounds familiar, right?" Mick didn't reply, but the elder's words stuck. That night, a Reaper drone operator buddy of Hawk's swung by their hooch, nursing a beer. "Saw something weird last month," he confessed. "Northern Afghanistan, figures 10, 13 feet tall, tending fires in a village. Bigger than the huts." Mick's patience snapped. He stormed into the company commander's office, slamming the door. "What aren't you telling us about that night?" he demanded. The captain, an athletic man named Ellis, didn't flinch. "You're treading thin ice, Torres." Psyche Val's a phone call away. Mick saw the threat in his eyes, silence or a padded cell. He backed off, but the paranoia festered. The squad felt it too. Rookie flinched at shadows, swearing he heard footsteps outside their tent. Doc caught an MP rifling through her gear, claiming it was routine. Hawk's laptop froze mid-search, then rebooted with half his files gone. Mick found a note slipped under his pillow, "Keep quiet," and signed, but the message was clear. The base felt smaller, the walls closing in, and every glance from brass carried weight. They'd killed the giant, but something else was hunting them now, something with power, not claws. Tension cracked the squad open. Hawk pushed Mick to go public. Doc wanted to ride out their tour in silence. Rookie just stared, lost. Mick mediated, but his own resolve wavered. Dan's death demanded truth, but the cost loomed larger every day. They were soldiers, not whistleblowers. Yet the giant's shadow wouldn't let them go. Late that night, Hawk woke Mick, his face pale. "Found this on X," he said, shoving his phone over. A blurry photo loaded, a six-fingered hand, massive, time-stamped near Bagram, posted by an anonymous account. "It's real," Hawk whispered. Mick stared, the whiskey haze clearing. The post vanished an hour later, scrubbed from the net, but the image burned into his skull. The squad huddled in their tent, the photo's ghost between them. "We could leak it," Hawk said. "For Dan." Doc shook her head. "They'll bury us. You saw what happened to that patrol." Rookie nodded, mute but terrified. Mick lit a cigarette, the flame trembling. "We'd disappear," he said. Like they never existed. He stood, pacing to Dan's bunk. The mattress sagged, untouched since that night. Mick traced the dog tags still hanging on the frame, the metal cold against his fingers. "He'd want us to fight," Hawk pressed. Mick crushed the cigarette under his boot. "He'd want us alive," he shot back. But the lie tasted sour. He didn't know anymore. Outside, the desert wind howled, carrying whispers of the ridge. Mick stepped into the dark, staring at the mountains. The elder's words echoed, not alone. The giant was dead, but the stories weren't. Kunar drones villages. Something bigger was out there, and someone wanted it hidden. He vowed to dig, to find the thread, even if it unraveled him. For Dan. For the truth. The tent flap rustled behind him. Hawk joined, silent. They stood under the sodium lamps, the base a fortress of secrets, and Mick felt the fight shift, from bullets to shadows. Whatever came next, he wouldn't let it win. Months later, Staff Sergeant Michael Mick Torres sat in a rundown apartment in Fayetteville, North Carolina, discharged from the Army with a PTSD stamp on his papers. The official story, he'd cracked after too many tours, hid the real reason. He'd pushed too hard, asked too many questions about that night in Kandahar. The bottle of Jack on the coffee table was his only company now, the TV flickering with static. Corporal Jake Hawkins had gone AWOL, chasing leads back in Afghanistan. Specialist Sarah Doc Reynolds and Private First Class Tommy Rookie Nguyen stayed in, their calls to Mick short and clipped, like someone listened on the line. He'd tracked down a vet at a diner off I-95, an AC-130 pilot, gray-haired and jittery, who claimed he'd flown the giant's body out of Bagram. 1,500 pounds, the man whispered, eyes darting. Strapped it down myself. No idea where they took it, stateside maybe. Black site. Mick pressed for more, but the pilot bolted, leaving a napkin scribbled with "They're still watching." The discharge hadn't stopped the dreams. Dan's spear-torn chest, the giant's red hair, those six-fingered hands clawing the dirt. Mick kept a loaded M9 under his pillow, jumping at every creak. The NDA held his tongue, but not his mind. He'd lost everything, career, squad, sanity, because of that thing and the brass who buried it. The photo Hawk found on X haunted him, proof they couldn't erase entirely. He wasn't done fighting, even if it was just him now. Mick lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dim room. Outside, Fort Bragg's hum faded into the night. He'd vowed to uncover the truth for Dan, but the deeper he dug, the more it felt like chasing ghosts. The pilot's words echoed, still watching. He exhaled smoke, staring at the ceiling, and wondered how long he had before they came for him too. Mick tracked down L.A. Marzulli in a dusty motel outside Raleigh, a fringe researcher with wild hair and wilder theories. The man had heard whispers of Kandahar, a YouTube video long deleted, a soldier's tale of a giant spearing a man named Dan. Nephilim, Marzulli said, spreading sketches across the bed, six-fingered hands, double-toothed jaws, straight out of Genesis 6 verse 4. Fallen angels spawn. The military's hiding them, Torres. Your proof. Mick leaned back, skeptical but hooked. It took 30 seconds of 50 calories to drop it, he said. Not divine, just tough. Marzulli's eyes gleamed. That's the point. They're not human. I've got sources, Cunner sightings, drone footage. They're out there. Mick didn't buy the angel talk, but the sightings matched Hawk's stories, the pilot's fear. Something connected it all. That night, a package slid under his door. No return address, just Dan's dog tags and a note. They're still out there. Mick's hands shook as he held the tags, the metal warm, like Dan's ghost lingered. He called Hawk's burner number, straight to voicemail. Doc and Rookie didn't pick up either. The squad was gone, scattered by the secret, and Mick was alone with the truth clawing at him. Marzulli's sketches stayed with him. Nephilim or not, the giant wasn't a one-off. The pilot's black site hint lingered too. Was it stateside, locked in some bunker? He dug through old deployment logs, cross-referencing AC. 130 flights from Bagram, but hit dead ends, classified or scrubbed. The note burned a hole in his pocket. Still out there. More giants? Or the men who silenced them? Either way, the cover-up ran deeper than he'd imagined, a web he couldn't untangle alone. Mick sat at his laptop, the cursor blinking. He'd lost enough, time to fight back. He typed up everything. The cave, the firefight, Reese's threats, the Chinook. Dan's name anchored every line. The truth was his weapon now, even if it got him killed. He hesitated, finger over the upload button, knowing it'd vanish fast. But Dan deserved it. They all did. Mick hit upload, the video streaming to a dark web forum Hawk once showed him. This is Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, he began, voice steady. March 2002, Kandahar Province. We fought something, 15 feet tall, red hair, 6 fingers. Captain Reese covered it up. Dan Carter died for it. He named names, dates, the hangar at Bagram, the AC-130. The file went live, a digital flare in the night. He leaned back, lighting another cigarette. The apartment was silent, the glow of the screen casting shadows. He knew it wouldn't last. Reese's kind would scrub it within hours, maybe minutes. But someone would see it, screenshot it, spread it. The giant's legacy wouldn't die quietly, and neither would he. Headlights flashed through the blinds, slow and deliberate. Mick tensed, grabbing the M9 from under his pillow. A car idled outside, engine low. Footsteps crunched on gravel, 2, maybe 3 men. His pulse hammered, the cigarette dropping to the floor. They'd found him, just like the pilot warned. The video was out, but the cost was coming due. A heavy knock rattled the door. Mick stood, pistol cocked, sweat beading on his brow. For Dan, he whispered, the words a prayer and a curse. The knob turned, then stopped, silence, thick and suffocating. He edged closer, barrel trained on the wood. Another knock, harder, splintering the frame. The door burst open, shadows flooding in, black fatigues, no faces, just rifles glinting in the dark. Mick fired, the crack deafening, but the figures moved too fast, a blur of training and purpose. The M9 clicked empty, and something cold hit his neck. A dart, not a bullet. His legs buckled, the room spinning as he fell, Dan's tags slipping from his hand. Darkness swallowed him, the last sound a rotor hum fading into the night. The giant's roar echoed in his mind, unanswered, unresolved. A secret too big to kill, too heavy to carry alone.